Hello, I'm Dr. Basil Considine, and we are going to be talking about writing about and condensing case studies. This is one of our targeted webinars where we look at a larger issue or a larger task through the lens of a particular assignment. In this case, an assignment from CONR 628, the Carl and Mary assignment, which asks you to write about, describe a case study, talk about the issues therein, and to ultimately recommend a course of action. This is one of our last webinars in the term. You can find information about how to make an appointment by watching basically any other video that we have on the Writing Center website or on our YouTube channel. We work with students at all points in their process. So if this is the first time you've had an encounter with the Writing Center and you'd like to submit a draft or questions for feedback and answers, you can reach us several ways. You can sign up for an appointment. You can send us an email. You can access the many resources on our website. With that, let us dive straight into the assignment here. We're going to be laser focused here. We're going to talk about understanding this assignment and what it asks you to do. And then we'll talk about how to take those instructions and go to the point of drafting an outline and laying out, here's exactly what the assignment asks you to do. And it's approximately the shape and form and length that you have to do. So let's dive into the Carl and Mary assignment. So this is for the family conflict dynamics class, and this is a week 7 assignment. And like most week 7 assignments, it is asking you to leverage things that you have learned throughout the term. And so while some assignments have asked you to stay very specific to the readings for that week, this as accumulating assignment as one that draws on all these things in the class, it is generally fair game to be using resources and citing ideas and authors that you have used before. All right, let's take a look at what's going on here. So there's a case study that's provided, and you're instructed to analyze a case study below, responding to this set of prompts. Identify the family structures, past and present. Identify the family life cycle stages. Identify and discuss the causes of conflict between those family members. Presence or absence of certain characteristics. Suggest and discuss certain techniques that could be helpful, and finish by creating a conflict intervention and referral plan for this family. All right, so it's a straightforward list. There are 6 things that need to be done here as part of your analysis of the case study. And the specifications, so it's going to be a Word document like your other assignments. So use our template. Include the word count on the title page, and it should be a maximum of 1,500 words and be pretty close to that. So, 1,200 would be significantly below that. 1,800 will be a bit more. And we'll talk about that a little bit more when we get to the rubric. Don't quote sources, so no direct quotations. Instead, you're supposed to paraphrase, summarize, cite, and reference your sources according to APA style. So attribute where these ideas are coming from. Double-spaced 12-point font, that is standard stuff for writing a paper in APA style, and that will be preset for you if you're using our paper template. All right, let's take a look at the rubric. And there are a couple things that stand out here. One is that this requirement, 1,500 words in length, is repeated twice. And if you look at the portions of the grade that are associated with that, and there's more than just the length in the item at the bottom, but basically you have 48 points, which works out to 20% of the grade. 20% of the grade is, does your paper do everything in the target length, formatted in APA style with everything that goes with that? So are you using the right font size, are the right spacing, the right margins? Do you have references? Do you have citations throughout your document showing where information came from? So if you look at previous assignments as training you to do these things in APA style, this is definitely saying, we expect that you will have mastered those and that you will know when you're introducing factual information, you should be citing the source where that comes from. That you should be indicating when you are doing synthesis through your phrasing, that you will be connecting these with logical bridges, that basically you'll be giving a clear argument and we can see where is this information coming from at each point. Is this from you because you're synthesizing, or is this something where you're summarizing or paraphrasing an idea from someone else because we see a citation in that sentence? And then the other 6 items here are basically the 6 elements that appear in the list here. So basically, do everything in these 6 bullets, do it in approximately 1,500 words, and do it in APA style with everything that goes with it. And that's the paper. Great. You know, at the end of the term, it's nice to know exactly what you're supposed to do and be able to make your list, check it twice, and do it. Now, the first question that I usually get from people is, well, how do I know what 1,500 words is? Now, the instructions specifically say, okay, that's not counting headings and that's not counting the reference page. And so you can use the word count tool in Word to see that. I'll show you in a little bit. But basically, if you have your headings in there and it comes out to 1,512 words, you know, probably 12 of those are going to be the heading text. So don't worry about that too much. It's when you're, you know, hundreds of words off that we start thinking, well, hold on. Did they do it in 1,500 words or not? All right. So it's going to work out to around 6 double-spaced pages, because a double-spaced page with 1-inch margins in APA style works out to around 250 words. It's not an exact thing where it'll always be 250, no more, no less, but around 250 words per page in double-spaced 1-inch margins, 12-point Times New Roman font. So this tells us that, you know, allowing for a little bit of introduction and a little bit of conclusion at the beginning and end, we're talking about a little bit less than 1 page for each of these bulleted items. So that gives you an idea that's probably going to be around 2 substantial paragraphs, maybe 3 shorter paragraphs for each one. So 2 to 3 paragraphs for each of those bulleted items on the list. All right. And then we have the case study. We won't dwell on this now, but you can pause this if you want to read through this now. Basically, we have a couple, Carl and Mary, who've been married for a long time. They're also business partners, and they have children from separate prior partners. Now, for those of you who have been in various counseling or conflict resolution fields, you know that this is the sort of setup that it would almost be surprising if there wasn't some sort of tension here. But the key thing is, what are the takeaways going to be? Because there's a lot of detail here that could be important for your argument or could not. And what you don't want to do is to just summarize the whole case study by paraphrasing all the details. Summaries should focus on the key details for what you're trying to do. It's like if I was telling a friend about a trip and they wanted me to visit. The key details they would be interested in is, are you driving near? And if so, when? So can I see you? And if I start talking about, oh yes, so I'm going to Vancouver, British Columbia, and they're down in Florida, you know, those are opposite ends of North America. So they wouldn't be interested. They'd ask me to summarize, okay, so yes, but when you are traveling in the United States, in the South, where will you be going exactly? And want me to say, well, I'm going to be in Palm Beach, and like, oh yes, so I'm in Miami, so you should absolutely come and visit me. And leave out all that stuff about, oh yes, so I'm going to be climbing redwoods in California. They don't care about that. They just care about the thing of interest to them, which is Florida. Visit, please. All right, so there are many other details in this case study, but let's now move and talk about how you refer to the case study. And it all comes down to one question. Is it formally published as defined by APA's 7th edition and thus accessible to the public? So if it's something where, you know, someone has a Word document on their computer, well, that you came and looked at in their office, that would not be considered published in APA style. Now, if it was in a journal, in a textbook, yes, you would be citing that. Something that is on the course website only, not so much. So in this case, we have a file on the website that no one who's not an ACU user with either enrolled in this class or teacher will be able to get at it. So that would not be considered formally published. So we can refer to this in the body of the text and say, oh yes, in the provided case study or in the week 7 case study, but we're not going to have parenthetical citations, and we're not going to have an entry in the reference list. If you think about it, we don't know who actually wrote this up. So having a reference list entry wouldn't really help for someone who's trying to track down a copy of their own. All right, so a few things before we begin on the drafting step. Remember that you want to answer each promptly directly and concisely, and then respond, follow up with more detail. If you're writing about your own experience, use I statements. But if you are speaking in a professional capacity, this is your professional recommendation, you don't need to bring yourself in there because you're making an objective evidence-based argument. And that doesn't require you to say, oh, Carl and Mary should do this because they meet these signs of X, and therefore, according to this author, they're at risk of this, therefore they should. So none of that requires that you insert yourself in there. Now, if you're making a comment like, I think Carl and Mary should not be married, well, that may be your opinion. You would have to make a clear argument for that, and it'd be better if you phrase that as an objective, evidence-based argument. Carl and Mary should not be married because they do not make each other happy, and whatever else you're saying there. You also want to make sure that you are using the language of the prompts. And in this case, we've got those 6 bulleted items that, at least for the direct answer, a short, concise, 1 or so sentence answer to each prompt that you then respond and unpack in the rest of the paragraph, make sure that you're using the language of the prompt there so it's clear that you're responding to those specific prompts. Don't rely on the headings. Headings in APA style function primarily as finding aids. We also want to use consistent word choices to refer to the same things. At this point, you've probably been practicing this for a while, but just to make sure, in APA style, it's very literal. And when you are referring to a word, you don't want to swap in a synonym because a synonym may be related, but it's probably not the exact thing. I'll give as an example here. I used to have a number of students who came from a particular religious background that manifested when they were writing their papers, they would use the word pontificated. Now I can tell you where that came in. They came in, they wrote something like wrote or stated, and then they'd use the thesaurus function in Word and say, oh, pontificated, that sounds good. And then they use it. And well, pontificate means literally to speak as if you were the Pope. And it's possible that the person actually was pontificating, but usually not. Usually it would turn out to be, oh, they just wrote this in their article. So pontificating would be adding unintended meaning. And that's another reason why we want to use consistent word choices. And so technical terms, let's use that exact technical term, and then there's no doubt about what's being referred to. We talked about this already, but do make sure the rubric gives you guidance on the approximate headings, organization, and section lengths. And because this assignment is really supposed to come in right around 1,500 words, you do want to make sure that you are doing just that. And just coming back to that case study, again, when you are discussing it, make sure that if it's published, you cite and reference it. But if it's not, as in the case today, that you refer to it in text, but don't include a formal citation or reference. And if you think about it, because this whole paper is about the case study, if you're citing it all the time, that would get cumbersome. That would just end up interrupting the flow of ideas. But the first time you mention it, okay, tell us how you found it. In this case, oh, it was provided to you. So you can just write, in the provided case study, Carl and Mary are. Then thereafter, when you're mentioning it, you say, oh, in this case study, or just skip to the facts. Mary has a problem with this, or historically, Carl has been doing that. Keep in mind that we want to have a consistent use of and logical use of tense. So if it's referring to something in the past, past meaning prior to whatever the now is in the case study, then all right. Now, there's also a very important tip here. If we look at this first bullet here, you'll see something where if you read the text out loud, it's very easy to catch a typo. And I do recommend that you actually read your text out loud as you go. Because if you read this out loud, you see, oh, Fred and Barney starting working in the quarry in 10,000 BC. It just doesn't sound right to have two INGs in a row. And so you see, oh, yes, that is actually a typo. That is something that I want to fix before this gets turned in. So the fact that it got in there, not a problem. So long as you run a spelling and grammar check to catch the easy stuff and read things out loud to catch the things that slip through there. So in this case, great, we found an error and it'll be really quick to go ahead and now for present events, the current active situation as described in the case study. Well, okay, just simple present. Barney is married to Betty. Now, if you're talking about something that's going on right now, we want to use present continuous, which has the ing form of verbs. So Bam Bam enjoys playing with his pet Hopperoo. If you're wondering about these names and the Hopperoo and what that is, for making references to the classic Flintstones cartoon, which you can watch on YouTube if you're really interested in. All right, future. So in the context of the case study discussion, this is going to be events and actions that haven't taken place yet. Usually if you're saying, well, this will happen if this is done or if it's not done, like Fred will get fired if he doesn't manage his temper. Conditional is using should, usually not would. Would might come up if you're saying it would be helpful if Fred did this, but usually you'll be using conditional to give recommendations. Fred should be more careful of his temper at work. And conditional can come up in a couple different tenses depending on what you're saying. Like if you're reflecting past events, oh, conditional past, what might have happened? Fred would have gotten fired if Barney had not provided him with an alibi. Or conditional present, you're talking about something that could happen, but you need to do something to make it happen. Like Fred would need to complete 10 days of perfect attendance in order to do X. All right, for the next part, we are going to grab a copy of the ACU course paper template. I happen to have one prepared, so we'll just switch over and we will continue from there. All right, so this, I'll just zoom out a little bit so you can see. This is a blank copy of the course paper template where I just filled in my name and Carl and Mary. Now, Carl and Mary is a bit brief, so let's make that Carl and Mary case study analysis because that's what we're doing. Are there other titles you could put it? Absolutely. But the important thing is to have a title that is functional and accurate, and then you can always go and add a new one later. Now, the instructions did specify to indicate the word count, and I promised that I would show you how to check the word count. So if you are in Word and you go to the menu at the top and select Tools, there is a function word count. And that will, in this case, pop something up and say, well, so far I've got 24 words in this. And I can go ahead and write down 24 now and know, all right, so excluding the cover page and the title of the page, I would just have to take whatever the word count is there and subtract 24 for just a quick check to see where I am. Now, and the other thing is that you can also select a piece of text and do the same thing, Tools, word count, and that will tell you, oh, for what's highlighted, I got 15 words. All right. So you can select the body of your text and not the references and not the cover page and do a word count for that. And just remember to fill that in before you submit. Okay, so the next step that we're going to do, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to grab a copy of the assignment instructions. Now, to start, I just say copy and paste the whole thing, and I'm going to throw italics on it so I know what is the assignment instruction, what is something that I write in later to this outline. So we know that this is going to be approximately 2 paragraphs per section. So I'm going to put in 2 to 3 paragraphs here and use that as a reminder to myself for each of these. It's going to be around there. Will it be possible to do it in one paragraph? Yeah, it depends how you word it, depends on how much you need to cover, and if it all fits naturally into 5 to 7 sentences. But we know here that there's going to be an introduction, and we know that there's going to be a conclusion. The introduction won't have a heading because we don't put a heading for introduction in APA style, but we do know that it's going to be at the top, so we'll leave a space there, and I will go ahead and make that a bullet. And remove the italics because. All right, so now we look at this and say, okay, so what are some logical headings for this? Because having a paper of 6 pages is definitely long enough where showing how it's divided will help you keep things well and concise and in scope. So in this case, all right, well, family structure seems to be the object of this one. And this one seems to be family life cycle stages. I'm going to write those in title case because it'll be a heading. Causes of conflict. And part of how you summarize is you leave out the details that are not important here. Because this is a family case study, having family members in each of these things, family members structure, well, you just say family structure encompasses that. And so we're going for the big picture. In this case, family resilience, characteristics, and then recommended conflict management techniques. I'm just going to type these in as is, and then we'll add the heading style later because I want to show you something. All right, so here, I just have to be clicked into this line. And if I go up to the quick style menu here, or pop out the styles pane on the side, it's going to be the same function. And so long as I've clicked in onto the line and I click on AP level 1, it'll convert that to an AP level 1 heading, which happens to be centered and bolded. Same thing with this one. I can go ahead and do that. Just to show it, I'm going to click for the same thing up here on the quick styles menu. Same thing here. So we know that they're going to be these sections here. All right, so now looking at this, all right, so this lays out. And it says past and present. So that leads to the question, all right, what are you going to do? Oh, here, well, it gives you an order there, so I recommend following that. All right. So let's break down this in a little bit more detail. So what goes into the case study? Well, of course, you want to state what you are doing in this paper. And that's, you could be as direct and succinct as saying, oh, analyzing the Carl and Mary case study shows us XYZ. You could also talk about the importance of understanding these things for developing a conflict intervention and referral plan. They're different ways, but either way, you're going to state what you're doing and list the major content of the paper in the order that it's discussed. And in this case, we know what the order is going to be for this major content because we have all these headings that show that. So that's something that you can do later. All right, now looking at this, all right, family structures past and present. So that's probably going to work out that this is going to be a one thing about, okay, here's how the family structure looks. It used to be this, now it's this, and then a separate paragraph about why. And if that's what you choose, then go ahead and have one paragraph on that, and then another one on the unpacking how or why that's important. All right, family life cycle stages, same idea. All right. Now, a helpful way of looking at this, we've got a couple individuals here. We have Carl. We have Mary. You could possibly have shared conflicts with others. For example, if we had three neighbors all in a line and the one in the middle played loud party music, and the two neighbors on either side might have a shared conflict with that neighbor in the middle who's playing the music too loud. Hopefully that isn't happening to you. Now, I'm not saying that this will be the exact structure that you'll come up with when you read the case study, but this is a way of understanding what's going on. Let's zoom in a little bit here. So let's say we're going back to that case study. Let me bring up the slides here. So one way to look at this is to say, okay, so who are the people involved here? And you can make a list, make two columns, one column for Carl, one for Mary, and then go through, and as you see a conflict that they have with someone, write it under each column. So looking at the third bullet here, we have, has never had a problem with Mary pursuing her faith until now. So you can have, okay, the past situation was this, the present is that. And then go look at your outline and say, all right, where would this fit in? Okay, so the family dynamics and everything, what are we looking at? And so if we're talking about the family structure or the causes of conflicts, that looks like it's a conflict in the making. All right, now let's see. We see now all they do is fight. Okay, that's definitely a conflict, mother and daughter. So I would put that in as one of Mary's conflicts. So you can, by outlining this in advance, when you go to do the reading, you see, Mary's conflicts with daughter. And so you do just go ahead and dynamically fill this in as you do the reading, because you know from having read the assignment and outlined it that there's certain tasks that you are going to be describing. And what this also helps you do is realize that you can discuss many of these things in the body of the paper, and you don't have to start the paper with a long summary of the case study. In fact, that's a difficulty that many students have, where they'll come and they think, well, I need to tell the reader everything to begin with. And so they'll give like a whole page or two of summarizing the case study. And you don't need that, because you just need to know, okay, these people are talking and there's some sort of issue or set of issues. And then you'll discuss the details in the following sections. And looking at the rubric and all the scoring that goes into that, we know that, okay, 80% of the grade is going to be going for the content here, for have you identified the family structures, past and present? Have you identified the family life cycle stages, etc.? So after reading the instructions for the assignment, checking the rubric, start doing up your outline, and then go ahead and read the case study. How many times you want to read it, that's kind of depends. Some people like to read it first and then go through looking for things. Other people prefer to start marking immediately. Either way, when you get to the point where you are starting to analyze and assess things, that's when you want to have the outline in hand and go ahead and start putting things in as you read from top to bottom. Some people find that if they put both two different browser windows up, or a word processor on one side and the web browser to read the case study on the other side. That works really well for them. Some people will have, two laptops and they'll put the reading on one and then they will be writing on the other, whatever works for you. But the important thing is to make sure you get in all the details that you're required. And if you have that requirements list from your outline all set as you start doing the reading, then you can get all those things down and then look and see, all right, so based on that, how much space, how much discussion, and then incorporate more details or more analysis as you go. And that helps you keep this much more concise than it might be. Because I've seen people come in with 11 and 12 page drafts because they were trying to incorporate everything rather than sticking to, okay, exactly what I need to do. And then if I need to have more discussion to fill up the space, I know, well, here's where it's focusing. And I'm just going to add more discussion about the implications or ground this comment in the literature. Speaking of which, let us talk about how you might cite the literature. So let's say that we were talking about the conflict with daughter. And I'm just going to type in some wording here. It's not going to be totally grounded in the case study because this is an illustrative example. Has a conflict over these events. And then refer to the literature. Okay, so what did people that you've been reading have to say about this? Well, according to this author, and so, all right, so you've summarized a key relevant part of the case study. Now you bring in an opinion from the literature about this sort of thing generally. And now you want to connect it to action. Therefore, and by doing this, we're not saying the author is pronouncing judgment specifically on Mary, but we're aligning our analysis with what the literature says on this. And using that sentence, therefore, the therefore comma is a logical bridge that tells the reader, oh, you're combining this information together. You are synthesizing. This is an insight that is coming from you, the author, rather than a piece of summary from the literature. All right, that is our presentation today. I hope that this has been helpful for you. We have hours going up clear through the end of the term, through week 7. So if you are looking to get help with the paper coming up, go ahead and sign up for an appointment now rather than waiting, because we do fill up as we get to the end of the semester. And with these week 7 papers, it often takes people a little bit because they're integrating all these things from the larger course. So sign up sooner rather than later, and we can get you some feedback on your draft and possibly more than one round of feedback. So have a great day.